thing that Bill 28 deals with, of course, the Electoral Boundaries Act, is, and it was certainly brought up a lot during the Boundaries Commission, was voter participation. We are all struggling with voter participation in this province. We're all trying to figure out, how to do it. How do we encourage more people to be voting? Again, you look at that distribution of seats, at the distribution of votes, and go, well, how many people are going, what's the point? What's the point of voting in an urban centre? Because my vote's not going to count anyway. But a lot fewer people in a rural riding are going to end up, their vote counts more. So why would I even bother? I have had people say that to me. I hope that is not the reason genuinely why they are not voting, because if that's true, then we just entrench that kind of lower voter turnout. I wonder sometimes if it isn't just a pat way of answering the question, but they said it to me, so I have to take that seriously. One of the other things that happened when you look at the Electoral Boundaries report that is encompassed in and put into practice through Bill 28, and for anyone that needs to see it, this is sessional paper 225/2010, so that is the actual electoral 2009-2010 Alberta Electoral Boundaries Commission proposed electoral division areas, boundaries, and names for Alberta. One of the interesting things that happened was this way that the Boundaries Commission decided to sort of divide things up. And I with a tip of the hat to one of my previous colleagues in this House, which was the previous member for Brooks, and he held various ministerial portfolios, but he loved to average things. And at a certain point he said, well, there's no poor children in Alberta, because if you average the children in wealthy households and the children in impoverished households, it comes out to kind of midpoint, so there's no impoverished children in Alberta. You gotta love that one, because then you didn't have to fund, of course, any kind of program. And that same logic, the Oberg principle, I'll call it, I find in play here, because what we had was a way of thinking about this that, here it is, I think it first shows up on page 5. And it talks about how many seats in Calgary, how many seats in Edmonton, and then the rest of Alberta. So outside of Edmonton and Calgary, everything else in Alberta got mixed into one, the rest of Alberta. And it shows, when you look at their various graphs, to be kind of more or less in the same mix. But when you actually look at how that breaks down, there is a massive difference in how many people are in those ridings. So mixed into the rest of Alberta, I'm putting little air quotations around that, is you've got some ridings that are the percentage of variation off of that average. So what they do is take the population of Alberta, they divide it by the number of seats and say, this is the average number. Now, is riding A above or below that average, and by how much? And this is how they start to figure out whether they need to move the boundaries around to either add more people into the riding or take them away, or whether what they've done is indeed fair. Okay? So if you look on page 16 of the Electoral Boundaries report, here you've got some ridings, and I'm going to save embarrassment here by not reading out what they are, but you've got one, for example, that's 15% under the variation. 15% under. 8% under. 7% under. Going down here, 12% other, another one 12% other, 15%, 11%, 23% under that average. That's one heck of a variation. So those are all mixed in together with a number of cities, because remember, they just said Edmonton, Calgary, and the rest of Alberta. So these rural ridings that can be that much under, 23% under that average, is mixed in with ones that include like the city of Grand Prairie or the city of Lethbridge or the city of Red Deer. Those are all in the mix with the rest of Alberta. So it's exactly the Oberg principle. If you take ridings that are very, very low and you mix in a bunch of urban centres with them, well, gosh darn, you're going to come up with, well, okay, more or less around that average that looks pretty acceptable to everybody else. And that is wrong, in my opinion. So when I look at the other side of that mix, when I look at the divisions in Edmonton and Calgary, you know, what has happened there? Well, look, 12% over, 14% over, 9% over, 10% over, 16% over, 10% over, 15% over. That's in Calgary alone. Those are Calgary ridings. So those are Calgary ridings where people in this House are trying to represent more, 10% more, 15% more, 12% more people than what that average is, okay? And that matters because they're representing more people. And when they try and talk about extra money for constituency offices to pay for translation services or dealing with poverty issues or casework or anything else, they're representing way more people. And they don't have the seats that reflect that. So when you look at Edmonton, we've got 8% over, 10% over, a bunch of 5s and 6% over, 12, 8. You know, once again, more people. So it was an entrenchment of the status quo that favors the government. Do I think that's right or fair? Nope, I don't. Okay, so I talked about voter participation and whether that happens. I talked about that Oberg averaging principle. And I just want to go through some of the things that were brought up and therefore get incorporated in Bill 28 and that were presented to the Boundaries Commission. Now, just let me stop here and say a small prayer of gratitude for the members who served on the Boundaries Commission. This should be an exalted position, but oh my goodness. I mean, basically, we took some citizens and we said to them, you're going to have to forsake your job. You're going to travel around the province for extended periods of time. Is the Speaker wondering how talking about what's in the Electoral Boundaries Report reflects itself in Bill 28? He's not. And they traveled all over the province. They were away from their home and their families for a long period of time, even their work. They may well have lost money. So, I mean, thank them. This was not an easy job. Now, the composition of that Electoral Boundaries Commission also matters.